Whoa! No Windy Sleeves family, No Win Mafia. Welcome back to another episode of the No Windy Sleeves podcast. Today we are sponsored by FT Performance Labs, all natural BCAAs, of course, and Glow Commando. Glow yourself. Welcome back, Coach Tut here. I'll be your host, co-host, Coach Erik Jones, the GOAT. And today we're here with David Kitchen.
Thank you.
Assistant Director of Olympic Strength Conditioning at Georgia Southern University. Welcome, brother. Thanks for hopping on.
Appreciate you, man. Glad to be here. This will be fun.
Heck yeah. Well, I know Rick and Kitchen, we're going to, use the name Kitchen. I don't think anyone ever really calls him his first name. So when we refer to Kitch or Kitchen throughout this, that's what that is. They go way back. You guys, did some training together, in college. Kitchen and my wife actually grew up together. They were really close friends. Berwick, PA, represent. So there's a lot of ties that go into the back end, but he has an awesome story. How he's got there is great, vision and perspective on culture and leadership. So we're going to dive into a bunch of that. But Kitch, if you want to go ahead, kind of introduce yourself, give him the backdrop, and we'll get rolling.
Sounds good, man. Yeah. So like Tut said, Berwick, Pennsylvania native. Shout out the dogs. Was lucky enough to grow up around Big Ash and then the Pippa clan. So Aunt and Paul and all them are kind of people I grew up around. Kind of took a different path into strength and conditioning. Had the opportunity to play some college ball at Susquehanna. Kind of the hometown hero story, sob story. Got hurt and ended up D3, and kind of honestly, for lack of better terms, just pissed the opportunity away and kind of let it go, get away from me. So from there, kind of got into some business, sold IT systems for about a year, realized that was not for me. Started coaching high school ball on the side, and kind of from there, things just rolled, man. It turned into, one opportunity after another, and I ended up, coaching at Robert Morris University, was at Bloomsburg for a while as an assistant, also as the director of strength and conditioning there. Went out to the desert, got to live in Vegas for 2 years, was at UNLV as the assistant director with football. Then I went back to my alma mater, actually, went to Susquehanna for about 6 months, and then I took the job down here at Georgia Southern, going into my second year here. So it's kind of been a wild ride. I mean, it's any 25-year-old that doesn't want to go to Vegas and live for 2 years is a liar. So I've had some awesome opportunities, but yeah, man, it's been a crazy run, but it all leads somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I say that all the time. I couldn't imagine being that and living in Vegas. I don't know how you did it, but just to kind of continue on of what you said, I was Coach Kitchen's first ever intern. Our office was in the laundry room, starting up the strength conditioning program at Bloomsburg. So, we got together where we were kind of both first starting out. We kind of went separate ways, but always kept in touch. He taught me a lot of things, was a huge mentor to me in terms of strength conditioning and just life stuff in general. So my first question to you is how in all the stops that you've taken, right? You've been a bunch of different places. You've done different things in terms of business and coaching. What are some of the things that you gained along the way that allowed you to climb the ladder like that and get to the place that you're at now?
Dude, honestly, man, there's the obvious things, and you can say the cliche stuff like, hard work and yada, yada, yada. But I think everybody that experiences success at kind of a young age, which, obviously I have a long way to go, but had some mild success at a young age, I think anyone can say that there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think the biggest thing for me has just been finding ways to add value everywhere I went and finding ways to kind of separate myself from other people. Like there's that quote that's, if your presence isn't important, then your absence will be ignored. So for me, it was always like, if I'm not there, I want everyone to notice that there's a difference. And, I want to make sure that I separate myself. So it's just finding ways to add value was one of the biggest things that I found. When I got to Bloomsburg, there was no strength and conditioning department for the whole university. It was just football. And, just seeing that as an opportunity, and opportunities are not given to you in the way that, okay, here's this opportunity, go take it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to create that stuff. So I think I've done a pretty good job of that throughout my career. And, like I said, obviously it led to me being able to be, at the time, the youngest strength coach in the country, way underqualified for that position. But just being able to create that value and create a situation kind of for myself, create my own opportunities was a big deal. And then, from there, like just following your gut. Like there's going to be people that are going to tell you, this is a bad decision or this is a whatever. When I took the job at Bloomsburg again, when I first went as an assistant for football, everyone was like, dude, you're going to be stuck in Division II. You're going to be a football guy, like all these different things. And, at the end of the day, anybody that's chasing any type of real success in the world, you're the one that has to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. So you have to go with your gut. Like there's going to be things that people are going to go against, and that's fine. It's my decision. It's my life. If I fail and I'd made the decision, I can live with that. So that was a big thing, man. And there's a laundry list of it, but I think those were the kind of the biggest ones. Following your gut, make your own opportunities and just adding value.
And I think that can really be, applied to anything. We're kind of in the coaching realm where that is very important, and it's so saturated. I don't want to get too much into that, where it's so saturated that you have to provide value at some point to make yourself known and climb the ladder. So I think, for everybody else, following your gut, providing value to whatever you're in, whether you're, an assistant executive or you're, the janitor, whatever you can do to provide value to create, and Mark Cuban talks about this, is like, my assistants are people who, I don't want to lose. Like, those are the people I hire. Is like, this guy creates so much value for me that I can't get rid of him. Like, he does so much, he makes my life so much easier that I can't get rid of him. So I think, like, in terms of trying to move the ladder and whatever you're trying to do, making whoever's above you, the supervisor, their life easier is the number one thing you can do to create that value.
100%, man. And I think it's, there's a lot of people out there that get in positions and they're like, well, I don't want to do things that are above me, or I'm not ready for, like, shoot your gun. You know what I mean? Like, there was a guy that came in and talked to us, and it completely, like, it was one of those, oh, wow moments, like a light bulb moment for me. A special operations guy came in and he spoke to us when we were at UNLV. And he talked about, when they get off the plane for an op and they're getting ready to go in, like, the worst thing that you can do is come home with a full clip. So, like, if you didn't shoot your gun at all, you got to stay up all night and clean or whatever, whatever that is. So I think that's something that people got to think about, like, dude, shoot your gun. Like, if there's an opportunity somewhere to make somebody's life easier, make the company better, like, even if it's a little bit outside your lane, obviously don't overstep boundaries, but dude, shoot your gun, go do something. You know what I mean? Like, don't just be another Joe that's my assistant and he does a good job. Like, that's not going to help you climb. You have to go above and beyond and find ways.
Yeah. And with that too, like, Coach Cox always talked about this. No matter how educated or qualified you are, if you're not a good person and have a similar vision on what they want, especially for you guys, I mean, you guys are there, 13, 14 hours a day. I better damn sure like hanging out with Rick if I'm going to be his assistant, because if I'm an overqualified dude and I just am a dick because I think I'm smarter than everyone, you're never going to make it anywhere. It all does come down to the humanization of it, of having a good relationship.
Absolutely.
And who do people do business with most of the time? Their friends.
People they like.
People they like dealing with, not the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, using Rick as an example, I mean, I was 24 years old, 23 years old when I took the job at Bloomsburg, and this dude was 21 years old in his senior year of college, and he came in and talked to me about interning and everything, and we got along. And that's the reason that I hired him. It had nothing to do with, like, his knowledge, because at that time, he didn't have anything outside the classroom. Like, he knew what he was learning in class, but, like, I liked the dude, and he showed up and he worked and he made my job easier. And he was somebody that at the end of the day, you can go have a beer with him. You can go hang out with him. He's somebody that I wanted to, like, sit down with and be around, that I didn't mind, being in the office with, like you were saying, 12, 13 hours a day. Like, that's what it comes down to. And that's any business whatsoever.
That comes with being a good leader too. And I think some people shy away from it. Is people get scared of hiring people who they think might know more or be better at some of those, problem solving things. Or, you might be turned off if Rick had came in and knew a ton, right? But as being a good leader, you need to identify the value of that and be able to say, they need me, I need them as well. Some leaders, they can't identify that they do need them.
Right.
The portrait, I don't need anyone, I can do it myself. You're going to have some issues with that.
And that's like I don't know if you've ever seen, like, the levels of leadership. Like, there's the Rambo style leader that's like, he thinks he can do everything, versus the team style leader, which is like the highest level of leadership. And yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. Like, there's so many dudes out there that you get in a leadership role and all of a sudden your ego goes through the roof and you're like, not only are you turned off by somebody being there, but you're threatened by it. And it's your own insecurities being portrayed onto that person or whatever, when really it makes the organization better.
Yeah. I think, and we talked about this before is in coaching and I think in any leadership role, you see that sometimes where these guys or girls or anybody is, they put on this persona of this alpha of somebody that, they have control over everything. But it's really, is it because that's their real personality, or is it because they have these insecurities that they feel they need to show? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that we're going to get deep into leadership because I know that's like a big thing for you. It like
fires me up, man.
I love it too. I mean, we were on the other day. I thought we should have recorded our conversation the other day.
How about it?
There's I always say there's two types of leaders when it comes to that. It's the guys that want to just dictate and say what to do and don't talk. And if you walk in the room, they're scared. They're like, oh shit, Kitchen's here. Or the people that like you and trust you and want to work for you because they respect you. I think there's two completely different things with that.
100%.
Some of that can go into the insecurities.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, as a leader, you have to understand too, you can only push people so far. Like if they don't trust you and they don't genuinely think that you have their best interest at heart, there's a wall and there's a limit to where you can push people. And you have to change that from, just challenging them to empowering them. Like, I'm not just challenging you, I'm empowering you. And, you think about your family, like your mom or your dad might do something and they don't have to explain it to you. Like, you already know that they did it because they care about you. And if you can reach that level with people that you're working for or working with, or people that are working for you, that's when you're kind of into that elite level of leadership where they understand no matter what you do, like, you're doing it because it's what's best for the company or the organization, and it's what's best for them.
And leading and managing offensive linemen is going to be a lot different than leading and managing the defensive backs. So you need
100%.
to be more to understand that each person needs a little bit different attention. Because people, everyone's trigger is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You got to wear multiple hats right there if you're kind of wearing that pressure on your shoulder of being the leader.
No doubt, and you can't be scared to try different things with different people. You got to push and figure it out. And I think when you first come into a leadership role, I think to myself, like, stepping into new teams and when I come into a new school, it's a learning process, and you got to learn for yourself. What traits you need to turn up with certain people and what traits you need to turn down. So, all of us in this conversation kind of have at times an alpha mentality to where we're kind of like bullheaded and we want to get things done, right? Or we wouldn't be in the situations that we are, but that doesn't work with everyone. So there's times where you got to be empathetic and you have to be able to have a conversation and understand, there's certain guys that I can lead a certain way and I can get in their face and really push them. And then there's other guys that I got to love them up a little bit, and I have to kind of come from a different place, which may not be natural to me. But at the end of the day, if you're a good leader, how you want to lead, your preferred leading style or leadership style is irrelevant if you can't lead the people that you have to lead.
And confidence is different than cockiness, and that's a big thing for him too. Rick and I actually battled with that the other day because both Rick and I are, we're always in leadership situations and we say we're alphas. So when we're together, sometimes we butt heads together like that in a positive way. Like, that's our relationship, but it can be a very combative style of leadership in different situations. You need to be able to take it back depending on what situation is.
Yeah.
And knowing if it's positive confrontation or if it's confrontation that's going to hinder what you're trying to get done. So, like, if you and Rick are butting heads and, like you were saying, it's in a positive way, that's your relationship, that's your communication style, then it's going to lead, that friction is going to lead to something positive at the end because something good is going to come out of that. But it's understanding as a leader where that line is of, like, is this a positive confrontation or is this not? And, I tell my guys all the time, like, this, if you're looking for a safe space, this ain't it, because I'm not going to lie to you. I'm always, and I think that's big as a leader too. Some leaders will lie or not lie necessarily, but sugarcoat things and cover up and dance around the truth to avoid a confrontation. For me, I'm like, dude, let's put it on the table. Let's have at it. And then let's move on. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I don't love you any less, or I don't care about you any less because you screwed this up, but we're going to address it, and then we're going to move forward.
Move on.
And I think what it kind of comes down to is, and you guys kind of hit on it, is being self-aware of who you are as a person and what your kind of style is and what works best for each situation. You know what I mean? There's no blueprint to how to deal with this situation or this specific problem or issue. You know what I mean? You kind of have to have that, we call it a coach's eye, but, have that mentality and that awareness of how to deal with certain things. And that kind of brings me to like the athletic side of things and how some of the things that you saw, and, I can talk about them too, but, some of the things that you see in athletics that you've experienced, and how, everybody knows sports, right? How can people take, the lessons that you learned as an athlete, as a coach, and apply it to what you do today in life, no matter what the thing is, you know what I mean? No matter what you're doing.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, if you can achieve a level of discipline in athletics, then you can apply that to anything in life. Like if you have a certain amount of drive and you have a certain level of commitment to a set of principles that you say are important to you, then you can apply that to anywhere. For example, for me personally, I was in college, I was at best a 2.5 to 2.9 student, and then when I did my master's program, I was a 4.0 student. Okay. And the only difference was my mindset. I'm still the same kid. I'm still the same, I have the same IQ level. The only difference was my mindset. I was just more disciplined. When I went back and did my master's, I had a higher level of discipline because of the things that I had learned in my life and the experiences that I had that allowed me to attack that with a different perspective than when I was an undergrad and I was inexperienced. I think that's something that, you see a lot. And that's a reason why a lot of former athletes end up in the C-suite and they end up being executives and managers and things like that because they've been through that. And I think handling adversity is the other big one. Like through athletics, you're always placed in a situation of adversity, and you're always placed in different, scenarios. And it's not always, people assume that adversity is negative. It's not. It's positive. And I think, sometimes learning to handle success is something that a lot of people struggle with. And you see the guys that go and they start a business, right? And they're killing it. And all of a sudden the business blows up, and then what happens? It implodes because they can't lead. They can't handle success. They get too high on their own, on their own ego and all those different things. So I think learning to handle success is something, and learning to be the same person every day, like with athletics. And there's all these cliches out there, like you can't cheat the grind or this or that, but like just learning to be the same person every day. If you're going to end up in a leadership role of any sort, whether it's being a father, husband, teacher, whatever it may be, you have to learn to be the constant, not the variable. People have to know what they can expect from you. Anytime you walk in a meeting with Tut, you need to know what you're going to get. He can't be a different dude every single day or you don't want to work for him, right? And it's the same situation with a coach, same situation with a father, same situation with a husband. It doesn't matter. Any type of leader, you need to learn to be the constant, not the variable in people's lives.
Yeah. I think that brings up a great point too of like, there's levels to leadership too, of like, not everybody's going to be a CEO of a company, but you can definitely be a father. You know what I mean? Where there's a lot of people that level, and that's a level of leadership. You don't have to be the top of the order, and even within a company, there's, the regional manager who still reports to somebody, but is in charge of somebody else. So that kind of goes into like knowing your role and when to lead, when not to lead, when to know, when to take a step back, when to take a step forward, and all that kind of stuff is important when, trying to finagle those kind of situations.
Yeah. And I think if you can't be a good teammate, you can forget about being a good leader. You know what I mean? I don't think you can have one without the other. I mean, even for me as a coach, like, yeah, I'm in front of the group. So you think about a football strength and conditioning scenario, right? I'm in front of the group in the weight room and I'm addressing the team. So in that situation, I'm the leader. Okay. But when we're in a staff meeting, I'm the number 2. I'm the assistant director. So I have a leader over me. So I got to be a good teammate. Now, I might not agree with everything that goes on, but I have to be a good teammate because it's not about me. It's about the organization. It's about the bigger thing. And then, even taking that a step further, we go to game day. Well, now myself, the head strength coach, we're not the leaders. The position coaches are. The on-field coaches are the leaders now. So you have to be able to transition between those roles. And I think that's what's cool about strength and conditioning and coaching is you get that opportunity to transition between those roles. But you get it the same way, in business as well. If you're a sales manager, like you said, like you're managing your people, but when you sit down with the VP of sales, you're not in charge, man. And you have to be able to float between those levels of leadership of being a great teammate and then being a great leader. And I think that's why they're so closely related.
I feel like so much stuff that you've hit on already is all kind of revolves around one main thing, and that's being able to look yourself in the mirror as a man and reflect and identify who you are. Without that, being able to know your role, know your position, and not try to be someone that you're not. Mm-hmm. You think that goes into a lot of leadership, is to be able to like self-identify and self-reflect?
I think self-awareness is the number one skill probably of a leader. Like you need to know, like you just said, what you are and what you're not, and be clear on that. There is nothing worse than a leader who doesn't know who he is. And if you can be clear on, your values as a human and your values as a man or woman, that's going to set you up more to lead other people, because you have to know what the first thing that people look at when they look at people that are going to lead them, right? They want to know, can I trust you? What are your intentions, and do you have a vision? And all three of those things come back to you knowing yourself. You have to know what you're about. It has to be, being able to control your emotions and separate, different situations, and being able to look at yourself in the mirror, like you just said, and take the time to reflect and be vulnerable with yourself, and not in a negative way. Like, David Goggins has his book about You Can't Hurt Me, and he's talks to himself in a very negative way at times, but that's his communication style. For most people, that's not going to work, because their egos and their identities are so fragile that they can't handle that kind of reality. They can't handle that kind of talk. And I've seen some of your videos, like you yell at yourself before you lift, right? You can handle that mentally. That doesn't break you. But for some people, imagine if some of the people that aren't self-aware, imagine if they tried to, yell at themselves that way, like they would crumble. And so you have to be able to know yourself and know your communication style, know who you are, know what you're about, and then go from there and build off of that. But in order to do that, you got to be able to take a look in the mirror. If you can't tell yourself the truth, then you're in trouble.
And consistency begins with being self-aware. Someone, if you mess up, fuck up. I don't know if this is going up on the NCAA stuff, but
you're good,
I'll
man.
say fuck up. People need to know that if they fuck up, you're going to respond to it the same way on Monday, March 14th, as you are on Wednesday, July 18th at 9 p.m. They need to know. It needs to be consistent. You can't say, it's all right, and then one day yell at them about the same thing. But
right.
And you can't identify your way and your leadership structure unless you're aware of it yourself.
Yeah.
And when you become self-aware, it opens up a new world.
A whole new world. And you have to have, like you just hit it, and I love what you just said, like the consistency piece. If it's not a standard, it's a suggestion. There's nothing in between. You know what I mean? So like, and in coaching, we say if you're not coaching it, you're condoning it. So if you're allowing things, not just in your business, but in your own life, like, are you holding yourself accountable? And are you holding yourself to that standard? Because if you're not self-aware. You know what I mean? And I think there's a difference between being self-aware and taking action, and being self-aware just to be self-aware. Like if I said to everybody here, like, and we all know somebody in our life like this that says, I'm an asshole. I know I'm an asshole, but you can take it or leave it, right? There's always that guy. And you're like, okay, that doesn't make you self-aware. You're just an asshole that knows he's an asshole. That doesn't make you any better. You know what I mean? Versus somebody that I'm going to work on it. There has to be action afterwards. Otherwise it's just like motivation. It lasts for 2 seconds and then you're back to who you really are.
So true. And being, like, I think what you said about being transparent about it, I'm not a yeller. So I always tell people, you're going to do this. If I yell at you, you really fucked up, because I'm not a yeller about anything. I let things go here and there because I trust you. But if I do, that means you fucked. So then they know that. So it's not like, well, one day I'm not going to care, but one day I yell.
I think there's there's probably more than two, but like the two main ways you can go about doing that is like, either I'm going to be that kind of passive guy where I'm not going to say a whole lot. I'm not going to be like super motivational or yelling like you said, but when you do something wrong and it truly affects me, you know what I mean? Like I'm truly invested in you as a person, and you're a part of my group or whatever it is, my organization, and you do something that's disappointing to me, you're going to know, and you're going to feel really bad that you did that. And you're going to, you know what I mean? And that's the kind of people that I think have the best effect, rather than somebody that's just going to be like, oh, I don't want to like upset him, like scared kind of like to upset that person, rather than being like, oh my God, like he's going to be so upset with me that, I didn't do what I was supposed to do that day or something like that. That hits so much harder than somebody's like,
if you're yelling all the time, when you yell when someone messes up, it's be like, oh, it's another day of coach yelling at me.
Yeah.
That's what I was just going to say. You can always turn it up. You can't turn the heat down. Like someone just said this the other day. I forget who I was talking to. And they're like, well, once the cake's burnt, it's burnt. Like you can't unburn it. And I was like, damn, I never thought about that. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't turn the heat back down on it. Like once you do it, you do it. And I think so coaches and not just coaches, but any leader, you got to think about, your reaction and does it fit the situation? And that goes back to being self-aware. Are you reacting that way because you spilled coffee on your tie on the way in and now you're just like, I'm having a bad day? You know what I mean? You allowed 5 seconds in the car to dictate how you treat somebody 2 hours later. And then you say, oh, my bad, I was having a bad day.
I have a question that goes off topic on what we're talking about, not script. I ask people this all the time. Do you think leadership it's something you're born with, or do you think it's taught and it's kind of built into who you are? Now, I'm not saying you can't become a better leader, but as a charismatic person who is a natural, do you think you were born with that, or is something that is taught, over time?
I think you can be born with certain traits of leadership, but I think it's just potential unless you train it. I think and the most common thing in the world, right? What's everybody say about their kids? He's got a ton of potential. Sweet. So does everybody. Good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Keep it pushing. So I think, I don't think they're necessary. I think you can be born more predisposed to leadership. Like, I think I was born predisposed to being in leadership roles just because I have an outgoing personality. I have a little more.
It's that charisma word.
Yeah, there's a little oomph to me. But I've also been around some guys who lead quiet strength. You know what I mean? There's guys that aren't necessarily charismatic, but they know when to speak and when not to. And when they do speak, it's very powerful. So I think it's kind of both. But I think there's people that are born, with the traits that they can be exceptional leaders. And I think for other people, it comes a little bit more difficult and they have to train it and learn certain skills. But I think those charismatic people too can also become very poor leaders. Cause I know some guys that are, I call them Capri Sun, like they're fake juice. Like they're always cranked up, but like there's nothing behind it. There's no substance.
You can tell who people are drawn to. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Rick and I hit it off so much. Cause right when I got to Nova, he was an intern before I interned there, and then when we both got promoted, I knew the day I walked in that he was the big stick of anyone else that was there besides the head coach. And he probably said 2 words to me. And I hate blowing up Rick's head. It's like the last thing I ever want to do. But I could tell, right? And he hadn't said anything different to me than anyone else did. But that you pursued the charisma, the confidence, the knowledge, right? And then since in the last 3 years, he's grown into a better leader. He always had the charisma, but now he's a leader. And I think that's where those traits and the books, the podcast, and the self-awareness have brought him to.
100%. And living it, I think, is the other piece. Like, so I look at my own growth. And when I was at Bloomsburg, I was speaking on the same things that I speak on now. Like, I've always been kind of, infatuated with leadership and kind of really been into it. And I talked about a lot of those things then, but I was 23, 24 years old. I was still figuring it out. And so I got by with those natural predispositions to leadership, to where people followed me because I was charismatic and I was able to portray a message. I've always been a good storyteller and I can get people hooked. But I wasn't living it yet. And so there was a ceiling to how effective my leadership was. And I'll be the first to admit that there was times where, it just hit a ceiling and the kids they believed it, but it wasn't the same. Now, when I speak on this stuff, because I've been living my life by these principles that I talk about, and I've seen the good things that have happened, I'm speaking from a different place because now it's truly, truly part of my character. And so I have the courage of my convictions, and I'm able to get up there and, like, the kids joke about it and they're like, "Coach, you're so intense." I'm like, it's because I truly believe it. Like, it's real for me now. Back then, I'm not sure that it was all the way real. I wanted it to be, but it wasn't yet.
And that creates that passion, the confidence, rather than the cockiness, where the cockiness kind of comes from, like, I'm not so sure about this, but I'm going to put on a front as that's what I'm about. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where the confidence and the true passion about something, that comes out where, now it's like, oh my God, this guy's really about this. Like, he knows what he's talking about. And you can tell the difference when you listen to somebody talk about it. What I do, and I remember we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And you've had so many instances of it, but give me one instance, one of the most memorable instances of you can say, like, a kid that came to you and was like, hey, I need some help with this kind of stuff, or, I feel like I don't know where my role is. Like, give us an instance, a pretty, insightful instance of this kind of stuff taking true place,
Man, that's a tough one. So there was a young man and it was a tough situation. He made a decision to be around some people that weren't the best for his life, and it ended up in an arrest and yada, 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 whatever. And I got the opportunity to sit down with him and his mother, and at his request, he called me and said, I want to meet with you if you have time, whatever. And I sat down, and here's a young man that I knew he wasn't a bad kid. He just made bad decisions. And, being able, he looked at me and he was crying and he said, "Coach, what do I do now?" And that's when I was like, oh man, like, this kid's coming to me for life-altering, like, the next sentence that comes out of my mouth can literally change the path of this kid's life. So that was one of the moments that I was like, okay, I need to be serious about this leadership stuff. And, I really need to handle this situation the right way. And luckily, the kid made the right decision, and things turned out in the best way that they could, granted what was going on. But I think that was a big one. And there's been a few over my career. I had a young man that came to me and said, I've always been the best player on every team I've been on, and everybody's always telling me to lead, but nobody ever taught me how. And I thought that was another really eye-opening moment for me as a coach that, I got to have that conversation with him and go through some leadership council stuff. So they're out there. And the crazy thing about coaching, and I think it's any type of leadership, the best moments come between closed doors. Like the best moments that I've had as a leader and as a coach are not the rah-rah speeches. They're not the stuff that makes the social media highlights. It's the one-on-one conversations when I'm having a conversation with a young man that is either struggling or growing or whatever it may be, and you see that light bulb click. Those are the ones that I love. Those are the ones that, for me, that's what it's about.
It's the relationships you've built. That's what it comes to. That's what the one thing I miss so much about college and conditioning is the relationships. And when you built that, you care about them. And when you took a role as a coach, you accepted a role as a leader. And I think it was Cox or Trace that always used to say, when they're, especially college, when they ship them off to you guys, you spend far more time with them than their parents do. So you are the number one most influential person on their life. So you have to understand that you're wearing, you have that on your shoulders when you accept that position and do any type of coaching.
Mm-hmm. And it's a responsibility, and I think it extends into business as well. Like people come and work for you because they believe in you. They believe that this company or whatever organization you're leading is going to take care of their family. They're literally putting their family's well-being in your hands to an extent. That's a responsibility. And I think that people don't understand sometimes that, or don't really internalize the fact that you have a responsibility to maximize, that potential, to maximize those relationships and those opportunities because somebody trusted you with, whatever that is. And I tell the kids this about their athletic gifts. Like, somebody gave you these gifts. You have an opportunity here that kids would literally cut a leg off for to come and be a Division I athlete, have everything paid for, have these meals, those shoes on your feet, all these different things. You have a responsibility to maximize that. If you don't, you're disrespecting everybody that didn't get the opportunity. And 100%. That for them is like eye-opening. Like, they're like, I never thought about it like that. I'm like, come on, man. Like, there's kids in the city, and there's kids in these situations. There's kids in small rural towns that never get a chance to get recruited because their school's terrible. They don't get exposure, whatever it may be. Injury, whatever. Like, dude, you don't understand the responsibility that you have that comes with it. Anything you're given, there's a responsibility to pay it back in some way.
And that's it. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Do you think in leading these young athletes for you, that's one of the hardest things to do is, portray perspective to them, to have them look at it? Do you think that's a big challenge?
Yeah,
100%, man. And I think it's tough for them just because they lack the experience, they lack the years, they lack the knowledge. They just haven't gone through enough. Yeah. And that's not to say they haven't gone through things. I have some kids who have stories that will make you cry, but they just don't see things from the big picture. You know what I mean? They haven't had a varied amount of experiences to be able to see things from the right way. So I think trying to give them perspective is exactly what I do on a daily basis, man. That's the biggest thing, is like every day I end my talk with, I love you guys. Keep growing no matter what. Keep growing. And those are things you just have to keep hammering because they don't click right away. And I look back at myself, 18 to 22, you couldn't tell me anything, man. I was it, boy. I had it figured out.
Yeah, and like to that point, you can't really blame them, especially these high-level athletes. They're getting recruited. They're getting hyped up. You know what I mean? You're the man. They've been the best at their sport their entire life. So what do you think they're going to have perspective they're going to have? They're going to have a one-lane perspective. And depending on what town they come from, they probably haven't seen that much diversity. You know what I mean? And that's with any young person. Like, and that's something that I'm super passionate about because I have from my perspective, I'm not saying I haven't figured out, but from my perspective, I was a kid who didn't get the opportunity to do that and would have done anything to be able to be in that position, to play college sports. You know what I mean? One, I wasn't really that good. And two, I had a neck injury where I couldn't even have the opportunity if I was that good to do that. So I got a double whammy. And when these kids start complaining or, talking about how bad they have it, I'm like, listen, man, you got it all wrong. You got to really take a step back and look at it from a broad perspective and see, where you're really at in life. And kids that can figure that out go a long way. You know what I mean? They really see the growth and the success comes once they figure that out.
And you want to talk about perspective, man. Think about this, and this I share this with the kids. Like, I'm so vulnerable and open about my mistakes and what I've done in my life. Like, I don't care. I wear them like battle scars, man. It is what it is. It's what made me who I am. So I was recruited, 1AA, D2 coming out, and I thought I was going to be the man. I got hurt, ended up at D3 school. You want to talk about a broken perspective? Dude, I didn't show up to meetings. My first collegiate practice, first one, 15 minutes late. The coach gave us one rule: no gloves on your helmet. What did I do? Gloves on my helmet, 15 minutes late. Practice one. Practice one. Okay, so you want to talk about a broken perspective, man. I didn't go to any
back and blame the coach for being a dick for sending you home.
And that's exactly what my perspective was at the time. It's not my fault. I shouldn't, and it always came back to this, the most cowardly thing I've ever said in my life. I shouldn't even be here. That's what I always told people. I shouldn't even be here.
I hear it all the time.
That is what? Like, how broken is that? You know what I mean? How broken is that for a perspective? When I'm here, I'm getting an education at a phenomenal school that I'm not paying for. And I'm out here saying I shouldn't be here. Like, how spoiled can you be? And that's where a lot of kids, I am able to say it now. And again, I tell them all the time, like, I'm not preaching from a mountaintop, guys. Like, I'm in the same valley you are, man. I'm just 3 steps ahead. I just already lived. The mistake you're about to make, I made that shit 5 years ago. So I'm just trying to tell you to walk around the puddle instead of stepping in it. That's all it is.
Yeah, and that's like what this is all about. Like when Tut first reached out to me about joining this thing, I was like kind of back and forth with it. And I was like, you know what? This is only going to make me a better person. I'm just going to be able to put myself out there, learn more about my profession, 1, and 2, become better at expressing the things that I'm passionate about. So when I do have to go in front of a group of people like that, I have experience in it. I've talked about it before. So just, and that goes with like stepping out of your comfort zone and all that kind of shit. But, those experiences, building those experiences is what allows you to talk about those things more freely and more passionately, and creates that confidence, creates that, knowledge and that perspective of it.
That's where I go back, Kitch. I'm like you. I openly talk about my fuck ups, like openly, probably too much to some young kids, because I had an amazing upbringing. You know what I'm saying? And I was just a complete dick. Some guts into some big trouble, but I wear those exactly the same thing like you said. What you're about to make, I already did. I'm trying to go around. And I always say, even with the whole no windy sleeves thing, we are not preaching here, sitting here thinking we've made it, we're at the mountaintop. Everything that we ever talk about is based off our personal experience. We're not saying it's the right way. We're always talking about, it's just what we know. It's the way we view it. It's how we went through it. And letting people understand that you lived it. I'm just trying to give you my perspective and keep you from making the same mistakes that I did.
Yeah. And what is that doing? And what is that doing? That's now broadening your perspective, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's broadening your perspective, because I think when you go through those things and you make these mistakes and then you flip a switch. So everybody has that. And I listened to E.T. talk, and I'm not big on the motivational speakers and all that, but he said this, and it was really cool. He said there was a moment when LeBron picked up a ball and he dribbled it between his legs the first time, and then he did it again and it went smooth, and he did it a third time. And he's like, everybody has that crossover moment where they start to realize, like, hey, something's changing, something's different. And so for you, Tut, and me and Erik and all of us, we've made these mistakes in our past, and we're still making mistakes. We're not perfect now, but at some point there was a switch that flipped. And for me, it was, 22 to 23. My whole lifestyle changed. Like I joked with you the other day when we talked, I said, if Ashley heard the conversation that me and you were having, she wouldn't even recognize me because of how different I am from who I was at 17 to 22, and really 15 to 22. But I think, that's, you get to this place of like an addiction to improvement. You know what I mean? Like you're addicted to like growing and like being around other people. And when that happens, you stop being afraid of the past and you stop trying to hide your mistakes and all these things, because you're like, no, I'm human. I made these mistakes, but look where I am now. That's not who I am anymore. So I can talk about it because I know that guy is dead. That guy's gone. He's not coming back. You know what I mean? So I think
successful people and the successful leaders and business owners are the guys that don't put the skeletons in the closet and leave them there. They're the guys, when they give the public speaking, those skeletons are sitting right next to them and they're giving it with them.
Right.
But those are the guys that have really mastered the art of leadership and growing businesses. And, like when you hide it, you have not grown from it yourself.
Yes, it's still bothering you in some way. If you hide it, it's still a part of who you are.
Yeah, and
so true, dude.
To switch gears just a little bit, leadership, obviously what comes with leadership comes a group of people, right? An organization, whoever you're leading. And obviously within that organization, there has to be some type of culture built, right? And you hear it all the time about successful groups, successful teams, successful businesses have to have a good culture. And there's so many different ways of doing it. How, in your opinion, do you start building something like that when you say you come into a bad situation? You're like, wow, this is, say you come into a bad team, you guys are 2 and whatever, and you see, whatever's wrong. How do you go about fixing that kind of stuff and creating that positive culture within a group of people?
Man, I think the first thing is, it's crazy because when you try and address a culture of a team, it's very similar to addressing the culture of yourself. I think the first thing is self-awareness. We have to know where we're at. We have to be very open about where we're at as a culture and as a situation, and understanding that this is not acceptable. And I think that has to be the first step. And then, understanding where the disconnect is. So there's 2 types of culture, right? There's the stated culture, which is what everybody wants to put on their hashtags. This is our, your hashtag dig in, hashtag, whatever it may be, your little acronyms that people love, your cliches. That's your stated culture. Your experience culture is what's actually happening. It's what's actually, what are your employees? What are your players? What are the people that you're leading? What are they experiencing? If they don't match, you have a problem. Okay. So I think that's the first thing that we have to do. Whenever I come into a program, I want to find out what's our stated culture. What do we say we are? And I ask this question in interviews with the coaches, like, what's our culture? Who are we? And I take those notes, and then I ask the question to the players. You want to find out the truth about what's going on in a locker room? Ask freshmen 4 weeks into their time on the team. They'll tell you real quick what the culture is. So I think once you figure out what that disconnect is, now you have to start to build habits. And the cool thing about culture is it's cyclical with behavior. So the relationship between culture and behavior is a really cyclical thing. So when I say that, I just mean if you introduce bad behavior to a good culture, it's going to negatively affect the culture if the culture is not strong, right? If you introduce good behavior to a bad culture, it's going to positively reinforce the culture. So basically, culture reinforces the behavior that creates it. So it's like a big circle, right? So you think about places like New England, okay? If you take one bad apple, take one bad apple, right, and you stick him up in New England, what happens? He wins a Super Bowl, he's rehabilitated. He's the best thing that's ever happened, right? Why? Because the culture is so damn strong, it's uncomfortable to be the outlier. It's uncomfortable. So that's what you have to create, is a set of principles and a set of standards that make it uncomfortable to be below that standard. And that can't waver ever, man. I think that's where people mess up. Like, don't make a million rules. Just make some standards. Like, this is just who we are. You're either above the line, below the line. That's it. It's that simple, black and white.
Yeah. And in terms of as a leader, right, it's your job to implement that. All right. You say you're the top of the chain, you're the head coach. All right. Maybe that's not my expertise. You know what I'm saying? Where I have my standards, but implementing that is not really, where I want to go, or I have other things to worry about. What are some ways that to be able to create a good culture without, having to micromanage every little thing about it?
Yeah. I think empowering the people below you, man, empower the people in your organization that are, the voice. Because really, and everybody's been there where a coach comes in a room and he speaks and then he leaves and everybody laughs. And you're like, that's not a strong culture. You know what I mean? There's a disconnect there. So I think if that's not what you necessarily want to do and you don't want to be micromanaging, it's teaching the people below you to lead. And those are skills that they have to understand. And that's a very learned behavior. And peer-to-peer leadership is tough, man, especially for 18 to 22-year-olds, because there is such a social pressure where they don't want to be, the guy that's calling somebody out, and they don't want to be the guy that's holding other people accountable. And it's the same thing in business. I know this from being in sales, like sales exec to sales exec, we didn't want to call each other out. Like, I knew Susie down in cubicle 3 was playing freaking solitaire and Candy Crush, and she wasn't making any phone calls. I knew that, but I'm not going to go call her out. Why? Because I have that, it's the social, whatever, I forget what it's called. Diffusion of responsibility. Like, if you're at an accident and you don't call 911 because someone else is going to do it, I don't have to do it, right? So it's the same thing that goes on within cultures. So I think the first thing is getting rid of that and getting people that are comfortable holding each other accountable, and teaching also teaching athletes to have conversation and teaching people within your organizations to have constructive, confrontational conversations. Confrontation is not bad. It's a good thing. It just has to be aimed in a certain way. And I always implement the dinner table rule. So, like, if something's bothering you, you got 24 hours to bring it up to that person or to a coach. If you don't bring it up in 24 hours, then you either condoned it or it wasn't that important. That's how I feel about that. Like, you can't let things fester, right? Because what happens, you have a meeting with a player when something finally bubbles up, or an employee, and they're like, well, John down the road he's been texting my wife for 6 months. 6 months, and you want to bring it up now? You want me to fire him now? Why didn't you bring it up 6 months ago? You know what I mean? Or whatever it may be. Like, I just think that's so important to, like, just have the uncomfortable conversation up front, get it out of the way, let's move on. And I want a culture of that where but in order to do that, you have to feel safe. Everyone has to feel safe in the environment, right? Because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to have those conversations because you're worried about what's going to happen to you or how you're going to be viewed by the rest of the team or the organization.
I think a big part of that with the culture with that is making people understand that disagreement doesn't always lead or shouldn't always lead to confrontation. They're two different things, and people won't voice their opinion or do something because they think, disagreement, it's going to cause a fight and a big confrontation. It's not a negative connotation of anything. If you disagree and you can approach it and speak it, that's actually a positive thing, and that's going to turn to better production. But people are scared of that, to disagree. But you think to put in your culture that they can disagree with you openly.
And so what happens when people are afraid to disagree in your culture? Whoever has the biggest voice and whoever is least afraid of confrontation gets to make all the decisions. And then you have, again, it's still a broken culture. You know what I mean? Like, there's times where, and I'll be completely honest, again, there's been times where I've taken advantage of that. If there's an administrator or not necessarily an administrator because it's hard up the chain, but like if there's somebody that I'm dealing with and I know that they don't like confrontation and they feel me getting agitated or getting, confrontational or whatever it may be, they feel it coming. If I push into that space, I know they'll fold. I know they'll crumble. And I'm going to get my way, right? That's not healthy. That's not good. I did that a lot when I was young. You know what I mean? It's the same thing as being the biggest kid on the block. If you're just the big bully, everyone's going to back down to you. And that's what happens within cultures and within organizations.
It's hard to find those people that are comfortable in disagreement without it leading. I've literally hired people solely because they voice their disagreements to me. I've hired them full-time job. Like, you challenge me in a positive way, I need you next to me.
Yes.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think, I was in a personal experience and Tut, I don't think you were there for that yet, but like at Villanova, as we had 9 interns over the summer, right? One of the things we did was halfway through, we all evaluated each other.
That sucked.
You were here for that?
No, but I got one of mine, and the one kid that didn't like me just ripped it apart.
All right. So, we all evaluated each other. We evaluated ourselves, and then we wrote little comments about, each person, what they could do better, what they were good at, you know what I mean, all that kind of stuff. It was meant to be constructive. But let me tell you, you want to talk about people being uncomfortable? We sat in a circle and everything was read out. It was anonymous, you know what I mean? But you kind of knew who said what by the way it was being said, you know what I mean? So you want to talk about people being uncomfortable. That was a huge thing for me personally to be able to do that. Like, I was like going into it pretty nervous. I'm like, I've never done anything like this before. But coming out, I was like, that's not really bad because the number one thing is we're trying to all get better, right? So that's our overall goal. You have to realize that you have to be able to do those things to get to the goals that you want to get to or get to the places that you want to be. And I think that's the main thing is knowing that that's the overarching theme, right? Everybody's trying to go in the same direction. You have people that aren't going in the same direction. That's where that afraid of conflict or confrontation comes in, where everybody's not on the same boat, right? We got multiple boats going different directions.
And it's a two-way or kind of a twofold thing. Like the feedback, first off, you have to learn that feedback's not personal. Okay, feedback has nothing to do with you as a person. If I'm evaluating you from a work perspective, I'm evaluating you from a work perspective. Me and my boss here, Don Days, he's one of my best friends in the world. We've been friends since I was at Robert Morris 6 years ago, and dude, we have it out. And I tell him straight up how things are, and he tells me straight up how things are. When we walk out of that place, we're still best friends. It doesn't matter. We're giving constructive feedback. It's not personal. It has no attachment to my feelings on him as a human or his feelings on me as a human. And that is something that people struggle with because, again, they're not confident. They don't have that self-worth, I guess would be the word. Like, they feel like, oh, he's attacking me as a person. No, man, like, has nothing to do with that.
And that's what I was going to say. You kind of alluded to, like, all right, so we know we have to get there, right? We know we have to, be able to deal with confrontation. How do you get over that wall? How do you build that confidence? You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's an answerable question.
The only way to it is through it, man. The only way to it is through it. You can't – there's no way to dance around that. Like, my boss at UNLV used to say a quote all the time, and I love it. He said, don't get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work, right? And so he'd always say, like, live in the tension, like, be able to sit underneath things for a long period of time. And, like, that it just is what it is. Like, that's the only way you're going to – it's like doing anything. You want to get better at squats? Go squat. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the answer is always counterintuitive. And I think that's what throws people off too, is they look like I think people sometimes are more self-aware than they let on, and they know the answer to the question. They just don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? Like, when Susie gets blown up in the sales meeting because her numbers suck, she knows she was playing Candy Crush for 4 hours a day. She just doesn't want to hear it. You know what I mean? And then she wants to come in and ask for a raise, or he wants to come in and ask for a raise. What can I do to be better? You know the answer. You know the answer. You want me to say something other than what I'm going to say, which is work harder, do more, be more disciplined, make it important. You know what I mean? Like, so I think a lot of times people try to avoid that stuff. So sometimes it's just bringing the truth out. And
you said it there last.
What's that?
You said it was the last thing you said. Make it important.
Make it important. Yeah.
Make it important. If you're a part of a group and it's not your number one priority, or it's not important to you, you're always gonna have those conflicts. Because you're always gonna have a reason why not to do something, because it's not important. You know what I mean? You want to be a good dad? Make it important.
You're gonna defend it. You're gonna defend it. Just do the work. Just at the end of it, if you did the work, you don't have to worry about anything.
Hey, you wouldn't be sitting there in that situation. But that's why it's so important, I think, when building a culture and with leadership, getting them to really understand that if you are a part of a team, you're all working towards the same goal. So if I'm on your shit, it's because we need that to improve to get to that goal that we share, and that's an important that people miss out, because if they're there and they're just about them having good stats, or, in a business thing, like, Rick joining No Windy Sleeves, like, we both want to get to the same spot, right? So if he gets on me, he's like, Tell you got to do this better. If I'm him doing that better, we had it out the other day a little bit. Two hours later, we were he told me for the first time he loved me, but that's the same thing.
Throw the L word around like that.
You both, that, we just want to get to the same place. And that's a good message to get across to these young guys. And let them know it's not personal.
No, man. And I say this to the kids a lot. Like, when they're like, Coach, why are you on me, man? And I say it loud so everyone can hear it. Because I want you to want to be great as bad as I want you to be great. Like, that's why. Because you have it in you. I'm just trying to maximize your potential. I just want you to want it as bad as I do, And so when people give you excuses and stuff, like, sometimes it's brutal, and I'll be the first to admit that. But I think it's something that people need to hear. Like, if someone says, if you're running a business meeting, right, Rick shows up 15 minutes late, and he tells you there was traffic, a dog ran out in front of him, whatever it may be, right? My response is, no, it wasn't important to you to be here on time. It's that simple. Like, it either is or it isn't. You know what I mean? That's what I love about, to take it full circle. That's what I love about athletics, that I think can be attached to anything in life. Like, when the clock hits 0, almost scoring touchdowns doesn't win you rings. You either did or you didn't. You know what I mean? And so I think there has to be, in life and in society, there's been so much gray area where everybody, well, he has an excuse. No, okay, good. You have an excuse. Excuses are useless. They do nothing.
You know what I mean? Just why it didn't get done. Well, guess what? It still didn't get done. And there's no one that's going to behind you going to do it. So you just let 60 other dudes down.
Yeah. And if you think about your experiences, right? Anytime you're in that situation, you were 15 minutes late to your meeting, or you missed something, right? You think about, like, okay, well, what else was going on in my life at that time? You know what I mean? Well, I was, talking to a girl at that time, or I had another job that was more of my focus. There's always something else and I'm just thinking personally of when I've been in that situation or done those things, there was always something else that was going on that seemed to be more important than whatever we were doing, and I know Tut knows exactly what I'm talking about, of mistakes that we made, going through, of, like, just, we didn't prioritize what needed to be prioritized at that time.
Dude,
that's
people.
one of the biggest things I've wanted to work on that I think it's a big thing too, is just straight up admitting that you fucked up.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting there and trying to come up with an excuse like, I shouldn't have done that. I'll own that one. I fucked up. Done. Moved on. Wash your hands.
And there's two thoughts for that. One, I truly wholeheartedly believe people always do what they intended. So when people say I didn't intend for that, yes, you did. Yes, you did, or you wouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? You do exactly what you intended to do. And then the second thought is I think leaders mess up exactly what you just said, Tut. So you saying that is huge. If you can't, I think leaders don't realize your first opportunity to own a mistake is the biggest leadership moment that you have. There's two huge moments in leadership when you first take over. One, your first confrontation. Two, your first mistake, because that's your opportunity to be vulnerable in front of your team. You're going to set the stage for what kind of relationship they have with you. If you try and hide a screw up and everyone in the room knows you screwed up, you are now lost so much credibility and they think you're a liar. You know what I mean? And on the other side, you have to be vulnerable. You got to be able to just say, hey, that's on me.
Yeah. And move and be able to understand that there might be consequences. You just have to move on and accept it and be a man.
And that is so hard to come back from.
Yeah.
When you do that, and I've done it, when you do that and you try to front it and you try to say, oh, well, it was because of that, and people then figure out, what that other priority was. That's so hard to come back from. You know what I mean? So I think
you don't fully ever come back from
point is you got to take that opportunity and seize it if you want to make whatever situation you're in successful.
Because when you own it, whoever you're owning it for is going to respect you for it and want you there and trust you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do mess up, they know that you're going to own it. Instead of because you can see someone wheels turning when they're trying to find a justifiable excuse for doing something.
Yep.
You can see it instead of being like.
And I think for all the people out there that are listening that are thinking to themselves right now, like, man, I do kind of make excuses, or you'll realize it's so much easier to just own it. If you don't try and lie your way out of things and you don't try and justify it, that level of self-discipline is so freeing. It is so freeing because you're not afraid of anything.
In every aspect of life. That has seriously been a big goal of mine this year, is to make sure not even the little things I do not try to sweep under the rug. Dog ripped up a bunch of shit yesterday. Ashley starts yelling at me. I'm like, I dog-proofed the room before I left. I didn't. You're right. I did not dog-proof the room.
Yeah.
Okay, well, do better next time. All right, I will.
Relationship, dude. How many times do you see that in a relationship?
It is
all the time. I mean, I people know I've done that. I'll own it right now. I am a huge committer of that in a relationship. And when that's something I've wanted to do personally is when you do those kind of things, that is when shit goes south fast.
That's what the common theme is here. Back to self-reflection,
Yeah, it is, man. And how many times do you get in a situation where the reaction is not even nearly as bad as you made it in your head? Like you thought you had this fear of if I admit this, then it makes me weak, or it's going to have negative repercussions. Dude, it's never as bad as you think it. It's the same as any kind of fear. Fear is exactly what they're false emotions appearing real. FEAR. That's what they are. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day,
they're the images that you've made it up in your head to be.
And now you're obsessing over them.
Exactly. That's where anxiety comes in too. So when you're more self-aware and can own up to things and you're comfortable in your skin, guess what? Your anxiety levels drop because you're not overthinking the what ifs, because anything that happens, you're actually doing.
Right.
So it all goes hand in hand with having that mental clarity.
100%, man. 100%.
That gets me juiced up about that. I'm glad we went on to that piece, just because I think it's so. I've done so many videos recently about self-awareness, and having someone that's in a different realm, a similar realm, but different path. Understand that, and that's a big pillar of what you're preaching to people. I think it re-justifies to me, makes me more comfortable knowing that it's a strong thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you step back logically, right? It's like, how can I try to hold my teammate accountable, hold my kid accountable, hold the guy next to me at work accountable, if I don't even know what I'm really about personally? And I think everybody figures that out as they go. I'm still figuring it out, and I think it may change as life goes on, hopefully for the better. But I think just constantly knowing about that change and realizing, that it's there, that you have to be able to – it's not just everything that you're looking at, you have to look inside first before you do anything else.
That's the hardest thing to do, though.
What's really cool about it is the longer you're in it and the more you're around people that, and this is what's so cool about No Windy Sleeves and what you guys are doing. Like when you surround yourself with people that think like that, you realize that success leaves clues, and you start to see all these common trends between successful people. And it's like exactly what you're talking about. Like it reaffirms things that I already thought that was a successful trait, but now I know, you know what I mean? And that's the cool thing about communities like this and bringing people together. You know, obviously Tut, you bring the business side and also the training side. And Erik, you know, me and you have known each other forever. So it just brings it full circle. Like you're able to see, like if people want to be successful, there's certain requirements for success. And one of them is self-awareness. And then it goes into accountability. And then all the other things that we discussed throughout this whole podcast, like that's the cool thing about successful people and forward-thinking people is that.
And I'm going to be selfish here. I'm going to be selfish. You know, yeah, we're putting the podcast together, so hopefully we can help people out. But I'm learning a ton by doing it.
100%.
Like,
I tell Rick and my brother this every day, right? Rick and my brother are owners of No Windy Sleeves. If we don't make $1 in 10 years and we're still pushing to do it, it doesn't matter. We've already succeeded. Because we've already got feedback that we've helped at least one person. And we are growing and learning every day how to do new things that I need this just as much for myself as we try to make it for everyone else. So it's a win. It's already a win.
It's always, man. Iron sharpens iron. Iron
One of the things that I did want to mention for in your aspect is someone who is much more college experience, been at much higher levels, you know, than I have been, you know, done a ton of big things already and very successful person already in yourself. A big thing of a good leader, a good coach, a good person, and a good friend is that you clearly do not think you are too good or too proud to ask for help when it's needed. There was an area, and that's a big problem for people. There was an area that I may know more, right?
You do.
You reached out, and someone who is very successful and knows way more than me in other areas. You actively went out of your way to reach out to myself and Rick for a little bit of assistance. Do you know how much, in my eyes, that says about you as a person? Like there are people that cannot do that and only think that should ask for help when you're in a bad place.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, man, your network is the most valuable thing you have in your life. And it's the thing, you know, aside from family and things like that, but as far as like building success, like your network is there to help you. That's what it's there for. And the fact that I knew that everybody's 6 degrees of separation, right? Everybody's within a couple phone calls of each other. And obviously me and Erik had a relationship. I heard that he got involved with No Windy Sleeves. I was super interested in what you guys were doing. And it just lined up. And obviously I had the connection to Berwick and, you know, your family and things like that. So I'm like, hey, let me reach out to this guy. Like this dude knows more than I do. Let me sit down and learn. But that only comes two things. One, if you're humble enough, and two, if you know what you want. You have to know those two things. Like if you go through life and you're blind about what you don't know, then you're useless. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to say like, hey, I don't know about this, so I'm going to call. And not just call one person and get an opinion. And not that your opinion wasn't awesome. I have freaking 3 pages of notes from our, 45-minute phone conversation. But I made then calls to other people. And I wanted to hear, from all different realms and I always want to learn. I always want to pull things like, and don't put yourself in a corner. And you know what I mean? So if it's something, if you're, struggling in a situation where you're like, hey, I'm in this industry, but I want to get into another, do your homework, go reach out and do that. If you're, you know what I mean? If you're stuck in a situation health-wise, like, hey, I want to get healthier, but I don't want people to judge me because I don't know, how to do this or that. Reach out to somebody that's knowledgeable. Like that, to me, anybody that's successful didn't get there on their own. And so they're willing to help,
I always say when we're in meetings now, which I couldn't do a year ago because I was not comfortable or confident myself enough. When people would ask me a question I didn't know, I would just try to, on the spot, make up a little thing that I knew, or say something along the lines. I'm now, if I don't know, like, what are we doing this? I don't know. I don't have the information for you. I will get the information and give it back to you. Whereas you used to think, oh, I'm in a leadership role. I need to know everything. You're doing them a disservice and doing them disjustice if you try to fake something or make it up or you're not transparent. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was a hard thing for me to do. And it took until I realized that I was able to reflect and be self-aware.
That's being comfortable in your leadership role. That's another thing that we talk about. And I use this example with the athletes, like when they get on somebody. So if somebody's screwing up, right, and they get on them, like, oh, come on, man, come on, do this, do that. Like, how he gonna be a captain? He can't do this. okay, hold on, guys. Let's talk about this for a second, right? So if I come out here as a coach and I set up the wrong drill, does that mean I can't lead? That means I can't be a leader anymore because I made one mistake? No. So how does it translate to him? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's such a hard thing for people to conceptualize. And I think as leaders, and I know myself included, like when you first get into leadership roles, you're so scared to make a mistake because you're like, all eyes are on me. And yeah, that's true. But if you make a mistake and own it, or if you're able to say exactly one of the most powerful things that a leader can say, I don't know, but I will find out. That to me is like, that's leadership. That's leadership.
And deliver though.
Yeah, and deliver.
And
right.
deliver.
Follow up
you
on it.
Come back
You can't just say I don't know now. Right.
You know?
If you do it all the time, then you're just a dumbass. But like,
yeah.
at some point you have to give the follow up information. But you saying I don't know, but I will find out. Okay, got it. We're good. Let's move on.
Once you do that, that's like, wow, he really cares. Like, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually did what he was going to say. Like that builds that repertoire.
It's huge. It's huge.
Well, before we wind down, we have really got deep into leadership and culture. If you had 1, 2, or 3, strict pieces of advice for people who are either in a leadership role looking to improve, or looking to get into a leadership role or just become a better leader, build culture somewhere. I mean, what are some lasting advice that you would give them?
I think if you're looking to get into a leadership role, do it before you're ready. I think, too many people wait for, when I'm ready. When I'm ready, I'll apply for that job. I'm not ready to be a manager yet. You're never ready. Just go and figure it out along the way, because once you get there, you'll figure out that not only are you more confident than you thought you were, but the people above you are going through the same situation. So I think that's huge. Like, you're never ready. So stop waiting. You know what I mean? Just again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Shoot your gun. Like, don't come home with an empty clip and wish that you did. And then for people in a leadership position, I think just being the same dude every day. Like, be the same person every single day in everything that you do. Develop habits and develop principles. Don't try and there's no hack to being a leader. Like, there's no life hack to it. Go through the problems, go through the bumps and bruises, but be the same person that's grounded by leadership, by principles, in their life, and make sure that the people that you're leading understand what you're grounded by and that they reflect those values. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest ones, man.
Yeah. That really hits home for me, as I know it does with Rick, about the consistency. You always see these up on Instagram. Consistency is then the key emoji, right? Because it's freaking true. Mm-hmm. You need to know what they're getting and rely on. You can't give work and be successful to someone that's not reliable and consistent every day.
Yep.
And I think kind of add to that is consistently be who you really are, because you're in that leadership role, because you're in that role for a reason. You know what I mean? You were put there, or you ended up there maybe by accident for a reason. So be, consistently authentic. Yep. Authenticity, I think, goes a long way.
Be the person that got you to that point. Don't change once your title changes.
100%. I have it's written on my wall in my bedroom. Recommit to what got you here. And every day you have to re-solidify what you're committed to, because the things that got you, it's easy to start swaying, right? When you get in that leadership role, like, there's things pulling in different directions. I mean, being at UNLV was my first time. All of a sudden, I could have let my head get big. Like, I'm on TV, I'm this, I'm that, I'm giving out free tickets. You know what I mean? Like, life is good. Like, no, man, I got here because I worked my butt off, because I shared a laundry room office with Rick. You know what I mean? And I was working 12 hours a day. I was doing my master's class from my car on the drive home from the office. I had Skype up on my dashboard while I'm driving, which I don't recommend to people, but it's what I had to do. That's what got me here. So at the end of the day, I just got to do the work. If you do the work, everything else will take care of itself. But again, like you said, it's got to be consistently. It can't be just Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It can't just be 2 days a week and then I earned it. No, you didn't. Not yet.
As Coach Cox always said, don't let your ego be your enemy.
That's it.
Can't do it. But kids, thank you so much for joining, man. This was, like Rick said, if no one listens, if I don't do anything, this was so beneficial for me that I learned so much from sitting here talking to you, man. I really appreciate it.
Love it, man.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Dude, I had a blast, man. You guys are awesome. That was awesome.
I'll tell you what, we didn't talk. I wanted to maybe possibly get into some training, but
we'll do another one.
Yeah, that can be for another.
This is gold here. I think this is This was on point. This is applicable for people's life. And
Absolutely.
if anyone out there, kids, I'm gonna have his handles for his Instagram. If you guys want to reach out to him for anything, he is there for you guys. Coach Rick, thanks for hopping on again, being the best damn host around with the knuckles out thing. But everybody, again, powered by FT Performance Labs and Glow Commando. Fuel your body, fill your sleeves, baby.
Love that.
Whoa.
Love that.